Hello and welcome to Free Hit, an FPL podcast. I'm your host, Chris, joined by my absolutely flying this week co-host, Jace. Went up 1 million in rank and also posted our highest engaged tweet of all time, if you don't count polls. So, Jace, doing good for yourself and doing good for the podcast. I just feel grateful to have you on as my co-host. Love to hear more about your game week.
I'm still pissed off. This game
Oh
sucks.
no. What happened?
Dude, Mazraoui getting yanked at halftime
He
when I
wants
had the
everything.
balls,
He wants it all.
to leave him in. I do want it all. I want the world. No, this game was busted. I think it's kind of one of those things. I was listening to Theo Vaughn's podcast, right? He was interviewing the brain lady. I think her name's like Tara Swart or something like that. And she was like, "Oh, well, you make decisions with logic or with gut feeling. And when you use gut feeling, you're actually you're still using logic, right? Like when things happen, you remember them. You may not remember them happening specifically, but your brain knows it happened. And when you use your gut feeling, right? All those things get taken into an account. So you're actually using logic both ways. So I was like, all right, when I'm setting my team this week, logic says the numbers say this is what's likely to happen. But my gut says FPL is going to FPL. And I took that into account when I was finalizing the team. So left Mazraoui in because I was like, Ten Hag's about to get fired. Guarantee United gets a shutout, right? Captain Saka because the natural tendency is to overcorrect and say, fuck Saka, he's horrible. We talked last week. Maybe we sell him.
Yeah.
And so my gut told me when I take the captain's armband off, he's going to haul. So same with leaving Wood in against Chelsea, things like that. I almost put the best team out there for the first time, but Roger he outscored Semenyo. So I wasn't perfect by any means, but it did feel kind of good to get a win, albeit thanks to Saka of all people, I think that just shows how polarizing and like trigger happy FPL players and FPL is in general, right? Like he's, sellable one week, undroppable the next. I don't know. That's just the nature of this game, I guess, or its players. But what do you think of my team? Did I drop a masterclass to get lucky? What do you think?
I love that you're learning about like the human brain, the process of how we make decisions. That might be almost more helpful FPL advice than anything related to teams and players because we all have our own biases when we manage these teams and when we select players and who we pick. I mean, it's just decision after decision after decision. You're doing it for 38 weeks in a row. Like it sounds like you're getting some extra like coaching on the mental aspect of the game that I mean, do you feel like that's pouring over? Is there a particular creator or podcast you want to shout out? That's you said Theo Vaughn was
Yeah,
what you were listening to?
yeah, but he was interviewing the brain lady. And it's funny enough, my wife, she went to grad school for behavioral decision making, right, at UPenn Ivy League. Maybe we should have her on the podcast at one point and talk about that aspect of it. I didn't really think about it at that point. I did think about it on my walk today. I was like, oh, okay, I'm listening to non-FPL podcasts to make FPL decisions. There's something there, it's like we're going Moneyball with FPL almost, a little different approach, but it's something to think about. Something we can look at that later for sure.
For the listeners at home, I'll just go through Jace's team. Overall, 74 points this week. I think the average was mid to upper 40s, something like that. Jace had Areola in goal, Mazraoui, Gabriel, and Trent, who I do not have, with an 8-pointer in defense. Bumo, Semenyo, Brennan Johnson. What does he have? 5 goals and 5 in all competitions? 6 and 6 in all competitions. A hell of a pick on wildcard so far. Captain Saka for 32 points. Haaland, Watkins, and as Jace mentioned, started Chris Wood at Chelsea for his 8-pointer. Pretty much everything went your way this week. We already talked through the Saka captaincy decision here. I think just having Bumo, like everybody should have Bumo at this point. But what are you seeing? We talked a little bit last week. Spurs have changed the system. Is Brennan Johnson, is he just hot right now? Or is this a guy you think that other people need to get into their team and seriously consider like quickly?
Yeah, I think we talked about it. And I still think Madison is maybe the better pick from Spurs, just with how integral he is. And he even got a goal himself at the weekend as well against Brighton. I think he's just involved in the play a little more, but Johnson could have had 2 or 3. Timo screwed up that chance we had in the first 20 seconds and somehow missed him, which is just beyond me how you can screw up that early in the game. But and then he had, there was an offside and some other stuff. So he could have returned more. I still think Madison's maybe the better pick, but I've liked Owen Brennan ever since he deactivated social media. He's been on a tear. Although the way that we imploded during that Brighton match, I'm not convinced in the Spurs project anymore. I'm very glad I don't own a defender at this point because my head was just on Mars at the end of that match.
I really thought they played okay for the most part. It was the first full 90 I've watched of Spurs since they started playing the Kulusevski and Madison
Yeah.
eights. And I agree with you. I was really impressed with Madison, how involved he was in the attack. I really wasn't expecting it from a number 8. Speaking of other podcasts we listened to this week, I listened to the Double Pivot podcast with
Yeah.
Michael Cayley. It's a soccer analytics
Yeah, I saw
podcast.
your tweet. Yeah.
Would highly recommend it. And they were going through some of the new managers in the Premier League and what they had learned essentially over the first 6, 7 game weeks. I shouldn't say new, but managers that were doing some things differently than what they had done in the past. And they talked about this Ange tweak that he made with the 2-8s and kind of how that
Mhm.
was impacting Spurs. And I think the takeaway that I had is they said that good managers can do stuff like this and, essentially get results greater than the sum of the parts or of the talent on the team. But the great managers will continue to adjust as teams adjust to their playing style. So Spurs have done this for 3 game weeks, 4 game
Yeah.
weeks, maybe something like that. I am really interested to see. It
This is the
seems like
last international break. Yeah.
yeah, you seem to have caught it at the right time, but it'll be interesting to see as teams defensively start to adjust to the way Spurs are playing more and more, if Ange makes another adjustment and potentially another player or FPL asset becomes relevant. But, from
Yeah.
my vantage point, just eye test wise, watching the game, thought the midfielders were really impressive. And frankly, I thought they deserved a result against Brighton. It seemed like the 3 goals they gave up were kind of
So
scrap goals
Spursy.
around the
Oh my god.
box.
I mean, Udogi ball watching, Romero ball watching. Udogi just made such a mess of the first one. It
Yep.
dropped right to you know what I mean? Like
Yep.
they were so, I understand why Ange didn't make any subs. He's getting a lot of grief on Twitter for it, but you think about it and you're like, well, this team got us to 2-0 in the first half. Logically, they should have been able to see the rest of the match out. And no matter what he was going to do at that point, it wouldn't have changed the result. It just seemed like Brighton were up for it and Spurs weren't. So, but yeah, I'm interested to see what tweak he makes too. I know a lot of the Spurs fans will be. A lot of people are talking Dragushin in for Romero against West Ham. He's a little more physically commanding. And they said that could be a change that he's looking to make, especially with the poor defending Romero did. And even Jed Spence, maybe in for Udogi. Spence had some really good moments. So 2 potential assets to look out for there from the Spurs side.
Anything else on your team before we get into? We'll talk a little bit more, I think, Arsenal and City after we go through these. But any other major decisions from this week? You rolled your transfer too. I
I rolled my
I had
transfer.
remembered us talking about something, but you decided to hold it.
Yeah, I decided to hold it because I listened back to the podcast, right? And I was like, man, everybody has a decent fixture after this game week. So there's no reason to move anybody on right now if there's no one I really want in the team, right? Rico Lewis was the one we kind of brought up, and I'm not sure that he was one I wanted at the moment. I'll probably revisit him in our talk later, but I'm just really upset that Mazraoui did not make it to full time because I thought I was really turning a trick with that one. I really did.
Yeah, is he? It's just a knock, right? We
Yeah,
expect him
I don't
back
know,
after
man.
the break. We'll have to
Yeah, I
keep an eye
expect him
on that.
back. Yeah, I expect him back. It just sucked because Lindelof came on and then he also subbed out for Harry Maguire. He got hurt, right? So he got subbed on, and I was like, oh, okay, yeah, Lindelof's coming on for Harry Maguire. And then like 5 minutes into the game, I was like, wait, Mazraoui never came back. Like what happened? And then sure enough, he's got a knock.
Well, we'll keep an eye on him. You can't win them all, but I think you certainly did win this week. You basically erased the entire gap between our teams. I think you were down probably about 40 points to me, and I want to say now you're within 15, and
Yeah.
certainly from a rank standpoint went from 1.4 million to, a little bit inside 400K, something like that.
I was surprised at how little captained Saka was this week. Under 10% in the top, was it 250K? He was captain. I said last week I couldn't ever make up for that Cole Palmer haul. I guess I did kind of, you know. So maybe I need to manifest that again. But yeah, I was just kind of surprised that so people were so skittish on Captain Saka with Haaland blanking in the prior week. Did we overthink that one?
I think Saka blanked last week. There's
Yeah,
always the recency bias.
that's
So the
true.
player that
Again,
blanked the week
behavioral
before,
science. Yeah, recency
exactly,
bias.
exactly. I think too, like Holland full season last week was his first time blanking. He still prior to this game week had 10 goals in 6 games. So when I was looking at it, so I captained Holland this week and obviously he blanked. I felt like Holland's ceiling was higher,
Hmm.
and given the ownership, I would be punished more for not captaining Holland
Yeah,
had the result gone the other way than captaining Holland. He blanked, but, again, I basically, in terms of overall rank, didn't really move much because he was by far the majority captain. Now,
absolutely.
having said that, post mortem, end of last year, we talked about captaincy. One of the things that we said was when there are two players that are projected to score a similar number of points, there's potentially a lot of value in captaining the guy who is less captain
Right.
because your variance is higher. And here I was in game week 7 with this exact choice.
Scenario.
Saka
Yeah.
was actually projected, at least on FPL review, at 8.1 versus Holland's 8.0. So Saka was not only from a gut instinct, but from a factual perspective, depending on the model that you're looking at. Like in some cases, was the more optimal captain. And I went Holland because I still have the hat trick against Ipswich and the hat trick against West Ham burned into my brain a little bit. And I also listened back to the podcast and we talked so much about how Saka doesn't really have any goal threat. A lot of his points were coming from assists. And then lo and behold, he has 2 assists and
Dude,
a goal
see
this
that
week. But that was my thought process.
yeah, look at his heat map, right? It's very funny. It was someone I think I don't know if it was Arsenal. It was definitely an Arsenal account. They posted his heat map from the game and it goes from green to red, right? Based on how heavily traveled the area was. And that corner flag was so red,
Yeah.
it looked like a target. So
Yep.
it just reminded me of that conversation. I think it, 'cause Saka was probably lucky. The one assist to Martinelli, I mean, that was a hell of a finish by Martinelli. He deserves
It was a
it was
great ball, though.
great
I
ball,
mean,
but
Saka deserved the assist points on that one for
yeah,
me.
the goal was on a counter, correct? And
Yeah.
luckily
It got deflected
and
into
deflected, yeah.
Saka's path
That's
because
right, yeah.
because my boy Raheem Sterling, at
Uh-huh,
least I think it was him. It's funny watching that one back of just like
yeah.
how many chances Raheem Sterling fucked up. Like exact same player, just different jersey. It was really cathartic to see. But I'm happy for him that he's on a good team.
Is that a post-Chelsea condition?
I can't remember much of his playing at Manchester City, but certainly at Chelsea, there were multiple times last year where it would be him and the keeper, especially like 2-on-1, and he just would not pass the ball
That's a very
whatsoever.
Timo thing too, right?
Yeah.
Like, it's the exact same. So I'm wondering, maybe it's a post-Chelsea thing.
I think Timo is a little bit more unselfish. He's just a
S
bad finisher. And
Donkey, yeah.
same with, we saw Traore against City this week, just had
I
multiple one
saw
on ones.
man, I saw a tweet earlier that said if Raul Jimenez had not gotten CTE from his concussion and Adama Traore had not been born with it, then they would have been one of the most prolific strike partnerships the Premier League had ever seen because they were together at Wolves too, if you remember.
Yeah.
Now
Yeah.
at Fulham, and I laughed for like 30 seconds. I thought that was pretty funny. They'd be incredible FPL assets if they had a brain between the 2
You
of them. You
You
know?
could cut a highlight clip of Adama Traore minus the final
Yeah.
touch, and convince someone who's never watched soccer, football, that this guy is the greatest
Yeah.
player of all time.
Dude,
Like
he played for
it's
Barcelona even. I think
yeah.
they may have done that when they recruited him, right? He was gonna come to Spurs for that time being, the Nuno period, but
Yeah.
thank God
It's
he
one way
didn't, I guess.
to filter out XG variance, I guess, is
Yeah,
to watch everything but the final ball.
that's right.
Um, anyway, so yeah, what do you think about that approach for captaincy? Because that's where I was at. I was yes, I understand the data, toss up, potentially lean Saka, but I'm also looking at the full season sample size to date rather than the
Yeah,
next fixture. I weighted maybe the past performance too heavily versus the expected future performance, but also it's one of those things where it's a coin flip. But if you get it wrong, you in this particular game, in this format, you just get punished on some of these marginal decisions, which was
yeah.
unfortunate.
I think you said it best when you said gray arrow this week for you. The last thing you gotta consider when we talk about that postmortem piece was your position overall in FPL, right? Are you in the top percentage, or are you trying to make up ground? In which case, I would agree with you that you captain the one that's going to be captained less because it'll help you make up that ground. Whereas if you're ahead in the top 100K or whatever, you captain the one that more people around you are going to captain and try and protect your rank. I think that's the right strategy. I really do.
Yeah. It makes sense from a heuristic standpoint, but
Hmm.
I'm wondering, I guess, is that the way that I actually want to play,
Yeah.
given that the model was lean Saka? Like maybe that was my opportunity to not only kind of hover around top 100K, but maybe, move
Get
into
into
the
top
top
50K.
50K,
Yeah.
right?
A million
Exactly.
places I jumped through those 32 points. That's kind of shocking to me. Really, because if you look at the rest of my team, it was really only 3 other returns, and they were all 3 8-pointers, you know? Oh, wait, no, I guess Brett Johnson got so 4 returns. Still less than half my team returned, you know?
Well, Bumo and you had Trent as
Yeah,
well. So I
so
think
that's 1, 2,
5,
3. Yeah, 5. Still less
5
than half my
returns. I mean,
team.
that's pretty good.
I was just shocked that I covered that much ground. Do you wanna go over your team?
Yeah, for the listeners at home, I ended on 49 points, overall rank of 112K. I had Flecken in goal, Saliba and Gabriel in defense. Another blank for the double Arsenal defense was painful. Aina from Forest came off the bench for Mikolenko, who was flagged as of Sunday night. Of course, he played on Saturday, so that was a challenge. In the midfield, we had Rogers, Palmer with a 6-pointer, Semenyo blank, Buma with 8, Saka with 16. So still owning Saka was enough to maintain the rank, but didn't really move
Yeah.
up a whole lot. And then it's striker Calvert Lewin and Captain Haaland for 4 points. Chris Wood on the bench. Nobody else really on the bench that was notable. Where do you want to start here?
We can start with your injury, with your flag.
Oh my
'Cause you
God.
kinda had a similar kick to the nuts that I did with Mazraoui in that the team got a clean sheet, but you didn't benefit from it, you know?
I'd argue it was worse because
Okay.
well, you know my thing about
Yeah,
injuries in
yeah,
this
yeah.
game, right? It ruins the game. Where if Mikolenko is flagged on Friday and I'm in the app and I see that, I probably make a transfer yesterday, honestly. I probably would have gone Aina to Rico Lewis with the point 0.2 million I had in the bank, and I am having some Rico Lewis regrets from the wild card, along with a couple other players in this team. But instead, of course, there's no injury reporting that's reliable at all for the Premier League. So there's no flag next to Mikolenko. And I wasn't on Twitter on Friday. So I didn't know that he was hurt and he doesn't play. And I lose points as a result. So that just feels bad. And it's, again, surprising to me that a league as big and as popular and as global as the Premier League has such shitty injury reporting, given that there are a lot of gambling partners. Fantasy Premier League is, in fact, owned by the league. So it seems to make sense that they would kind of make this work. But, the English are very old fashioned in their sporting events. So, yeah, I had the same frustration as last year on the injuries. That the extra transfers help, but it doesn't help if I don't actually know if one of my players is injured or not before kickoff.
Yeah. Yeah, that's frustrating. Usually it was Howe though that we were really struggling with Howe and Pep, and you just can't trust a damn word they're gonna say, can you? Or don't say in this case.
Yeah, and I mean, it's still not ideal, but if someone is flagged, then you know that there's a chance that they won't play,
Yeah.
whether How or Pep is truthful about that. You can look at the app, see the flag, and say, oh, I need to check on this player and basically hop on Twitter because, again, there's no official status anywhere, right? But if the guy is not flagged, it does not
You
prompt
don't have
me
the
to necessarily.
information. Yeah.
Exactly, and again, was just busy on so didn't go look, and then I saw later it's like some Ukrainian newspaper is like, "Oh, Mykolenko's hurt." It's like, great, that doesn't help. So, luckily, the damage was minor. They did miss out on the clean sheet. I missed out on Rico Lewis assist points, but, it's a defender, so, whatever. I did wanna talk about defense,
Yeah, I
actually,
was
while
gonna say,
we're.
speaking of missing out, double Arsenal blank.
Yeah, who do you think the 5 best defenders are in like, what should the optimal defense look like if you're gonna wild card this week? Because if Arsenal keep blanking, City keep blanking, I think Trent's in there, but his fixtures suck the next few weeks. Like, I'm struggling to figure out what
Yeah.
the back line should look like.
I've been struggling with this conversation with myself too, because you look at, even if you want to target fixtures, you look at who has the best fixtures, and it's Man City, hands down, right? But can you even guarantee that any asset that you buy from Man City is going to play? And I don't think you can, right? You got, even if you rank them, right, just by form, you've got, Guardiola's up there because of his one goal, right? So maybe he has some goal threat, but that goal came from a game where he wasn't even getting forward. He just kind of lucked in,
Yep.
like he wandered up there at the right time. So I don't know that there's not even a City player in the top 20, you know. So I think you got to be creative. You can't really lean on fixtures. We talked about Eight Nori, right? And lo and behold, he scored this last game week, but he's got City right next at
Yep.
home, and I think they're gonna run all over him. But then he's got Brighton and Crystal Palace, so you can target Everton. They've got some decent fixtures coming up, but again, any other teams, Nottingham Forest have good fixtures, but it's Nottingham Forest, so they're likely gonna concede. I just don't know that there's a lot of defenses that are really good at keeping clean sheets this year. You'd think that this fixture run with Arsenal was a
Yeah.
clean sheet guarantee for at least 3 game weeks, and they haven't gotten a single one.
Yeah. I mean, Trent is the best defender in the game,
Yeah.
hands down. I think that very easily, right?
Mhm.
Bad fixtures coming up.
2 bad
I think
fixtures.
I think you just hold him
Yeah. I'll play
because
him.
there's really no, yeah, just play him. There's
Yeah.
really no, he'll get an assist in one of those games or something. I mean, there's really nobody else. So then you drop to the next tier. Yeah, I mean, Ben White, nobody has because he hasn't been playing. Arsenal guys, Gavard is in there. Poro is out of a lot of teams. Trippier is out. Like, I am struggling, I think, and even I was just looking up Rico Lewis,
Yeah.
who I think some people would argue is the second best defender in the game because you're getting a quote unquote nailed City defender for
A bargain.
4.7.
Yeah.
Okay, here's his game log. 6261024. I mean, he's not exactly lighting the world on fire, right? So
Yeah.
I'm just like, who should I go to instead of Arsenal defense, or should I just hold Gabriel and Saliba for the rest of the season and just call it a day? And what happens happens. I
Yeah.
mean, I'll go back to Trent at some point, but not
I
for the
was gonna
next two.
say, I don't know that you certainly, I think there will be some people who might reaction sell one of their double Arsenal defenders, right? I think Trent's the logical place people are going to go, but I think Gabrielle might even get a price rise tonight. He was one of those, hovering around. So I don't think people are shying away by any means, but I think you give it another go at least for the next game week or so, just because the fixtures, like you said, they look pretty good. But I don't know that there are any really defenders that are in that good a form. If you look at the form, I mean, Dallow's at the top of that list. Yeah,
Yeah.
you know. just because of the recent clean sheet. So it's not really something you can put up there. But yeah, I'm just maybe this is like the goalkeeper situation we talked about last season, that there aren't as many attacking defenders that are in good defenses where you can look for the haul, and maybe you just kind of got to go for one or the other at this point.
Yeah.
Or we're being reactionary again, and that could be the case too.
Well,
I'm glad we used our wild card when we did, because I would not want a wild card right now.
yeah. The other thing I wanted to mention and you talked about Gabriel
Hmm.
price rising and what happens if you use the wild card this week. One thing we have not talked about that I wanted to mention that I'm seeing is that player prices seem to be only going one direction this season,
Yeah.
and that is up.
Uh,
Haaland is 15.4 million. Salah is 12.8 million. Saka is 10.1. Palmer's 10.8 from 10.5. And then even guys like Rogers is now 5.3. Bumo is now 7.5 after
Yeah.
starting with
I
7.
think Nkunku might be the only one that's dropped.
And Eze, I know, is like
Oh, and
6.8,
Eze,
was the
yeah.
only guy.
Yeah.
But like basically everybody that everyone's had since game week 1 has only gone up. And I think when we saw these 5 free transfers, we're like, great, we can optimize for fixtures, even defense, right? Like we're talking about Gabrielle. Okay, well, play him this week. He's got tough fixtures, transfer him out, and then transfer him back in. And you can play with that a little bit more. But now you're getting this like tax every time that you transfer somebody out and transfer back in. And I just haven't seen anybody's price really go down that makes me think like even our wild card, right? I dropped Holland in game week 5 and wild carded him back in game week 6, and the guys I transferred in returned, but I lost point 0.3 on Holland. I had him originally in the team at 15, now he's 15.3. Are you concerned at all? Have you seen the same thing here? Like I'm just
Yeah.
getting nervous about moving a guy and not Trent's the same way, 7.1, like
Mhm.
moving him out and not being able to get him back in because it seems like everybody's going up, nobody's going down.
That's what I meant, last week when I said I couldn't get to Cole Palmer without, because selling Holland is the only way to get for was the only way for me to get to Cole Palmer. And it wasn't an option because I wanted to bring Holland back in, and then if I had sold him, I wouldn't have been able to bring him back in at that point, if you use that money, just because, like I said, I had him early and he's gotten those price rises. And like you said, there's always been a transfer fee associated with transfers that I never fully understood the thought process behind. But yeah, it's tough, man. It really is. I am a little concerned. I was lucky I moved early on my wild card when I did, because I got ahead of some of those price rises. But if you missed two or three of them during that last game week 6 or whatever, I mean that could have just hindered you, because like you said, a lot of these guys aren't dropping.
Thought process behind pricing in this game, that's an oxymoron. That
Yeah,
is,
yeah,
that's the
good point.
that's the game within the game that we all love. It's pricing, it's injury reporting, and it's, BPS changes multiple days after the game
Dude,
ends. That's
don't get
really
me
the,
started on the VPS BS. I'm glad I'm not the only one that was calling that out last week.
oh my god. It was so funny on Twitter. Everybody
Yeah,
was posting like, "I got so and so points." Like, we'll see what happens in 2 days
yeah,
because who knows what they'll do. And they were tagging them too,
yeah.
which is deserved,
Yeah, I
frankly.
agree. Yeah, not that
It
anyone cares, I guess, but, you know.
it's it's not hard to make a like not shitty fantasy game, especially when you own the game as the league. So okay,
True.
we don't have to get into that. Yeah, let's see. We talked about Captain Holland versus Saka. We talked
Yeah,
about defenders. We talked about price rises. The
my
only other guy. Oh, sorry. You want to
I
go?
was
Then
gonna
I'll
say,
go.
the last thing I'll say about defense, we can touch this later, is it's just it might be a good opportunity to make up some differential points. You look at a guy like Justin from Leicester, he had a 10-pointer this last game week, and currently is 2% owned and has Southampton, Nottingham Forest, and Ipswich as his next 3 fixtures. So I think there are a lot of options like that maybe don't look sexy up front, but there could be differentials if you take the risk. So
Yeah, maybe a little more punty. I agree with you on Wolves. After this week, they have
yeah,
really great fixtures. So Eight Nori and Cunha, and I mean all those guys. I think are going to start. It's like that week towards the end of last season where all the Wolves guys.
that's
It's like
right.
Sarabia.
Yeah,
started
it was
popping up in
Wolves
all
and
these
Crystal
games.
Palace, and we're like, "Okay, these guys are fun to watch. This is awesome." And now they've
Yeah,
both just sucked royally.
yeah.
Yeah.
Speaking of fun to watch, I wanted to go back to the City game.
Yeah.
Another guy who has price fallen this season that I think if you have 2 premium mids is going to be in the conversation as Saka's fixtures start to turn
Mhm.
and who also plays Wolves this week. There's a lot of potential segues here, so I'm just throwing them all in.
Yeah.
Phil Foden. Phil
Yeah, it's
Foden
Lucky
was
Phil.
back on the pitch this week against Fulham. Seemed to be central, was very involved, had a few shots, no big chances, but De Bruyne was out, so it's kind of hard to tell. But I think maybe we can consider him back. Do you have plans currently to bring in Phil Foden, or just where are you sitting on him? I think he's really interesting given the price point.
Yeah, I'm with you. I have looked at where I can fit him in the midfield, and I think it's just gonna be tough if you wanna keep kind of your Johnsons and Buemos and, like, especially for you since you've got Saka, Palmer, and Haaland. I feel like it'd be tough for you to get him in without sacrificing one of those guys. But when I wanna get off Saka, Phil Foden's probably the first place I'd look. My issue is I want him now, right? And we talked about this last week. Like, there's gonna be a great City asset in there for these next 4 game weeks. We just don't know who it's gonna be. I guess it's Kovacic, right? But I don't know how valuable that is either. I would love to own Phil Foden for these next 3 game weeks. Wolves away, Southampton home, Bournemouth away. He's just ripe for points, but I don't know that he's gonna play. And that's the issue because there'll be European games in the mix there as well. The good thing is we have an international break, 2 weeks of recovery. So surely he's not gonna get, like, injured or anything like that, but I'm just not, I guess, sold that he's gonna return, you know?
Mm,
Like you said, he had some goal threat in the game, but he wasn't one that bailed him out like he was last season, right? It ended up being Kovacic. And Holland was pretty quiet himself. He had a couple chances that he's scuffed, but, I'm just there's just not a nailed guy that I'm gonna be like, "Oh, yeah, I need to own him, and I need to own him right now. It doesn't matter who I get rid of out of my team, I'm getting him in." I'm not getting that urgency feeling like I feel like I should be with cities having a fixture run that they have right now.
yeah. I mean, I think one challenging thing here is that Wolves just let up 5 goals to Brentford, and they let up 6 goals to Chelsea
Mhm.
earlier this season. I mean, I think clearly one of the worst defenses in the league. If you're ballsy or you're chasing, maybe Saka to Foden
Mhm.
this week is on the table. For me, I think that's a little bit too risky given the expected minutes consideration that you had, right? Where we're just not
Yeah.
sure, and Saka still has a good fixture. My other question here is from a team structure standpoint. So you've got the forward pool, which has Watkins and Havertz, and then like kind of like Solanke and Nick Jackson, sort of in that secondary tier. And then in the midfield pool, it's really Salah, who has kind of bad fixtures now, Palmer, Saka, and then Son and Foden haven't really been super relevant. Like, would you rather have 2 strikers, 8,000,000 and above right now, or 2 midfielders, 8,000,000 and above, and then kind of like rotate the midfielders? Because I think that's if you want to get Foden for your team, you would have to sell Watkins.
Yeah.
I have a 2 premium midfielder team, so if I want to get Foden, I have to sell one of the premium midfielders.
Yeah, it's a good question. I'm with you. I don't know that I can get to Foden. Yeah, even if I use, like, Johnson as fodder, I couldn't get to him. So I would have to get rid of Saka, and I don't know that I wanna do that just yet. He's got Bournemouth away. So the week after that, though, looks a lot more enticing to me to move from Saka to Foden. That gives us an extra week of information. Does Foden start again? Does he look a little more comfortable, a little more goal thready? I just wish City would have signed another striker, or another attacking player that wasn't Gundogan that you could own that maybe might be a little cheaper, but it could give you a way into that City attack, right? Even with Alvarez last season, even if he only played like 10 minutes, he was good for a goal contribution. He was good for a look at goal 2 or 3 times. It wasn't bad owning it. Like I was okay to make that bargain. I don't see that there's a City asset right there right
Yeah.
now that make sense doing it. It sucks because they got great fixtures.
Yeah. Do you think even okay, so, like, Palmer is about to have bad fixtures. They have
Yeah, but
Liverpool and
I think
Arsenal in 2
Palmer's
of the next
fixture proof.
4.
I really
Yeah,
do. Yeah, he's
okay.
too stupid to let a competitive game get to his head. I truly do buy into the Twitter hype that he's just too dumb to have any sort of doubt about himself.
Too dumb. It's
Did you
just
see
he's
the
just
did you see the gif where everybody's kicking off in front of him and he's just like, "Oh, I'll just have a seat here. This is
yeah.
nice." You're like, "What
Uh,
what is going on in that guy's head?"
yeah. He's got kind of that, English football academy demeanor,
Yeah,
sort
he's
of
like
like
a poster child for it, the haircut and everything.
yeah. Well, okay, so on those lines, what I was gonna pitch though is that a lot of
Yeah.
these premium midfielders have fixture turns.
Uh-huh.
Like speaking of city assets, any like case for a Haaland, Foden, De Bruyne triple up, 3 game weeks, you're in, you're out.
That'd be risky,
Assuming
I
De
feel
Bruyne
like.
is back after
I
the
was gonna
international
say
break.
that's a lot of money on a hope and a prayer that all 3 of them play the minutes you want them to. I'm less worried about Holland because they just don't have anybody to replace him, bless his heart. But Foden and De Bruyne, I feel like when was the last time we saw them on the field together?
Probably a while. I mean, De Bruyne supposedly has a groin injury,
Yeah.
right? So like he should, in theory, should be back, and I'm assuming he's not gonna play for Belgium. European rotation, I think, is the big
I don't
thing,
think
especially with
anybody's gonna play for Belgium at
Gundogan.
this point.
That might be true too. Yeah, I was just looking at the expected points table, and I don't see De Bruyne here. Yeah, it looks like his X minutes in game week 8 are really low, and then he kind of goes back into a normal X minutes prediction in 9-10. And maybe you agree with that, maybe you don't. But I don't know. I feel like if you wanted to get really, really punty, given that all of the other premium midfield assets have bad fixtures, City have incredible fixtures. Like maybe short term, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, whatever, with these extra fixtures, you get in, get your guys. Again, the problem is like everybody's price is up. So you sell Saka, you play De
It's
Bruyne or
gonna
whoever,
yeah, it's gonna be a
you got
pain
to
in the
buy him
ass to get
back.
him
And it's
back,
just
yeah.
like, yeah, you're just dealing with,
And City have the Sunday kickoff too, so you won't even get like a leaked team sheet to where you could like
it's
make
true.
a late early morning for me transfer on a leak. So like I said, if they had the early game, that would be something to watch out for sure. But with it being on Sunday, you're just not going to get that information, I don't think, and I wouldn't count on Pep giving it to you
No,
either.
of course not. All right. Well,
Yeah,
I think we're aligned then. Like City clearly have the best near term fixtures, but we can't really move away from Saka
yeah.
yet, and we wouldn't necessarily trade down on Palmer to Foden even through harder fixtures because the guy's been so consistent and unbelievable this season. What about the strikers? Do you think anybody like Havertz, Watkins is movable at this point, or do you think you're holding on to those guys for a little bit longer?
I cannot believe Watkins didn't return against United. I'll say it. I thought that was a shoe in. But here we are. I'm gonna hold Watkins for the next at least 3 game weeks because he's got Fulham, Bournemouth, and Tottenham, which are just super like easy fixtures for him to
Yeah.
return. Right. Bournemouth's home, the rest are away. So I'm probably gonna hold Watkins strictly for the fact that there's not anybody I would want to replace him. But you look at Wood and you're like, okay, I got the points. He's got 3 great fixtures coming up.
Yep.
Crystal Palace at home, Leicester away, West Ham at home. And even if you're considering like taking a punt on Delap or whatever because he's in good form, why would you move from Wood to Delap unless you really needed that extra point 7 at this point million to get to someone else? I could maybe see it, but to me, the fixtures are too good for the 3 forwards for me to move. Watkins, I guess, would be the one, but I've only owned him for the 2 weeks, and I got the 1 return. I'm not ready to give up on him
Yeah.
yet. I owned Havertz at the beginning. I didn't like owning Havertz. It was a lot like owning Nick Jackson, I'll be honest.
You know,
Former Chelsea,
Havertz.
again, it's
Yeah.
on the it's gotta be something you guys do on the exit interview.
Yeah, like, would you like to play for Arsenal? Yes or no? We'll just forward that along. Maybe we can get a sell on,
Whole
for
separate
that.
flow chart for that's true. You guys love selling to each other.
Yeah. I think what Havertz played where we thought he would play when we
Mm.
talked about wild card. They switched sort of to 4-2-3-1, so he
Yeah,
was playing more 10, but he, regardless of playing in midfield, has still returned. He's sort of like an out of position striker, but he almost,
yeah,
when they do have the ball, it seems like they're playing almost like two strikers. Like he's very much in the box. So I think for me, I mean, obviously the defense hasn't worked out. That was a tough one on wild card. But if I had Havertz, I wouldn't have had Palmer. It's
yeah.
again, I feel like you're sort of stuck between two premium mids or two premium forwards
Mhm. No, that's a good point. And if Odegaard comes back and he's healthy for this next match, and Havertz is playing a more traditional striker role, then I think that makes a lot more sense to me to own Havertz. But
for sure.
yeah, you just have to wait and see what Arteta says.
I was hoping he would blank, and then he would be one of the guys whose price
Yeah.
came down, and potentially get him back in when Arsenal's fixtures change. But
Do you think
no
we'll see a
dice.
lot of price volatility here in the next couple weeks? Do you think there are wild cards out there enough to make a difference? Or
I think we'll see on Arsenal's fixture swing, like if Saka goes down, but we certainly didn't see it on Liverpool's
yeah,
fixture swing because Salah and Trent are still at the prices that they rose to, which is going to be really, really challenging later in the season. So I don't know. The teams that we thought would have the swings are having the swings as we speak. So maybe when we get back from break, we'll kind of see where things settle there. But it does make me nervous from a price
yeah,
standpoint.
yeah.
Any other fixtures you wanted to touch on from this week, or should we jump to transfers
Yeah,
and captaincy?
please don't make me talk anymore about the Spurs fixture.
Well, I thought we'd go, deep dive into the Newcastle Everton 0-0. Um,
On those two things though, decent assets, potentially. Everton's fixtures aren't that bad. But from the Spurs side, Brighton side, I saw a little bit out of that Brighton team. Again, maybe assets that I want to own in the future when the fixtures turn. For Brighton, I don't know if I think they said that's around like game week 16 or 12 or something like that.
yeah, it's coming
So
up. That's why I got
yeah,
Verbruggen, because it's basically when Brentford's good fixtures end,
yeah,
Verbruggen's fixtures start, but also Brighton defensively looks
not been great.
horrible. Like I
Yeah.
think he's another regret on wild card for me for sure.
Yeah, when that comes, I'll probably look at like a Minta or Matoma.
Or
Or
Welbeck even has been really the guy.
I am just not so I don't know what to do with that piece because if João Pedro comes back, who you know what I mean? Like who gets the minutes? Do he and Welbeck just share minutes more? They both play and like one of the midfielders loses out on the minutes. I'm just not sure what Herzler's gonna do, which is why I'm a little skittish there.
It seems like João Pedro and Ruder are 10s,
Yeah.
so the only competition for Welbeck would be Ferguson
Or
coming
his health.
back, who we haven't seen in 2 years really
Yeah.
play consistent minutes. So I feel like he's pretty safe, honestly, for now, and he scored again. So
Yeah. Don't remind me.
anybody else you want to touch on this list?
No, that was it. Some interesting fixtures. I mean, the Brentford Wolves one was I can't believe Mbeumo only had the one
Yeah,
return. I think that I
Wolves
could
are
say
still
that
a
for
dumpster fire for sure.
yeah, yeah, absolutely, absolutely. No, we can talk about transfers. We kinda already hinted at a few of them earlier on. I
Yeah,
think I'm
but
looking for a defender right
okay,
now.
you have a lot in the bank though, right? I mean, you could get crazy if you wanted to.
I have I've got basically $1,000,000 in the bank right now and 3 or 4 free transfers, sorry.
4, yeah.
Yeah, 4 transfers. So, I'm not sure what I wanna do. I am looking for a defender, and I don't know if I move Hardwood Bellis or Greaves up to Justin from Leicester. He looked like a good one that could potentially be a differential. They've got good fixtures coming up, but so does Ipswich. And that being said, it's Ipswich. So, is there really such thing as a good fixture for an Ipswich defender, right?
No.
Yeah, exactly. And that's kind of the conversation I'm having. So, I think I keep Mazraoui just because he's got Brentford at home and West Ham away next. But I'd probably move right now Hardwood Bellis up to Justin from Leicester and look at moving on maybe a midfielder. But again, I kind of like the fixtures for this next game week, and it's the next game week after that I want to start making moves on. So I may just roll again and have all five and see what kind of damage I can do there or maybe just use one at a time for the next couple weeks.
I don't like Justin. I'll
Yeah.
tell you that. Leicester do have good fixtures. I'm just thinking of like the other, and there's no good defenders. So, I mean, who the hell cares, right? It's a
Yeah,
marginal decision anyway. But I was just looking at expected points for defenders under 5 million. Let's ignore Udogi because he's
yeah.
basically 5 million. So you got the Forest guys, Ina and Moreno, who have good
I don't like
fixtures.
Moreno as a player.
Okay. Ina looked pretty good, honestly, against
Yeah,
Chelsea. He had more,
yeah.
he's getting actually some pretty decent expected
Super
assist
lucky Chelsea
numbers.
did not return again in that game, though. I could
Yeah.
not believe they did not score again. That was just
The
shocking to me.
both keepers were
Yeah,
great, down
yeah,
the stretch, and some crazy stuff happened. Pinnock, because of Brentford's pictures. I also really like Anderson from Fulham at 4.4
yeah,
after the City fixture this week.
yeah.
Point being, if you look
But
at
that's what
this
I mean.
over the next however many game weeks, there's a
Yeah,
lot of guys on this list before you get to James Justin.
yeah. Well, like I said, he would be a vibes pick. He would be a gut pick
Gut
if we're
instinct.
back. Gut instinct, or recency bias because he just returned. See, I'm using these.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay, can I pitch another one to
yeah,
you?
yeah, yeah. Pitch away, batter up,
Okay. Give me Ollie Watkins down to Cunha
King Cunha.
and Semenyo up to Foden. I don't
Yeah,
know that you can get there or not.
yeah,
You might have to downgrade your bench keeper to 4.0
yeah,
too. So you basically have Cunha's has a bad fixture this week and then great fixtures afterward. You could start Rogers, and then you would have Foden for all 3 games in City's run. You'd have Cunha set up for the Wolves run. You'd already be off Watkins before his tough fixtures. And you get rid of Semenyo before he has a couple, where they have Liverpool, Arsenal in the next 2, something like
yeah.
that. It might be too early to make
That's
that
what I'm
move on
saying.
Watkins, to your
Yeah.
point, but that would kind of solve all 3 problems if you could figure out a way to get Foden in for Semenyo into the midfield.
Yeah, but what defender problem does that solve for me?
You don't need a defender. You got
I
Trent,
think
you got
I I
Arsenal,
think I
you got
need a defender.
Mazraoui. You just told me you're starting Mazraoui next week.
Yeah, I don't know. Well, if he's safe, yeah, you're probably right. Maybe I don't need a new defender. Okay. Well, we'll see. I don't hate going because Watkins is going to have to be the make weight here, as you
Yes.
alluded to. I just feel like I only got the one return out of him, and I think it's too early to move off him just yet. He's got decent fixtures coming
Yeah.
up, so I don't know. I'm just not really sold on moving him on, and I'm not sold on moving Wood on either because of his fixture run. So I think it's just another weird week where I'm not sure that I feel like I'm robbing Peter to pay Paul on some of these transfers. But after next week, I feel like I can make, or after the next game week, we're on an international break. After the next game week, I feel like I could really make some big moves and get some players in because then, like you said, Semenyo's fixtures turn, Watkins' fixtures turn, then Rogers in turn, right? Maybe Embuemo, like something like that. I feel like there's more movement there. Saka, even.
Yeah, fair enough. You're right. It might be too early. I'm just thinking of how can you leverage this position with
Yeah,
all these transfers and get Foden before everybody else while still having Saka. I guess
yeah.
that's the way I'm thinking about it.
Foden's definitely the one I would target if I could upgrade somebody who's not named Bukayo Saka or Brian Embuemo, just because again the fixtures look good, so it's
I
tough.
don't think did you get Rogers at 5 million too, or did you get him on a
Nah,
wild card?
I got him at 5.2, I think.
Okay, so
Yeah,
he's easier to move. Like, I don't think
yeah,
I can move him because he's 5.3 now.
yeah,
I'd rather just have the 5.0 spot in my team,
yeah,
but
yeah.
nice.
Fair enough.
Okay, let's look at my
Yeah, what are you
team.
thinking?
I have
I
2
already told you
frees.
about Aiden Nori. I think's a good pick after this next game week too. So again, a lot of I think next game week, a lot of decisions could be made after that.
Yeah, I think I'm in more of the holding pattern. I have 2 free transfers, point 0.2 in the bank. Fixtures this week don't look quite as good. I have a
Yeah,
lot more aways than homes, but the only guy with a bad fixture is Palmer away to Liverpool. I think it's too early to go Foden, but that would be one to consider if I could get Foden against Wolves. And the goalkeeper, Flecken, is away to Man United. Verbruggen is away to Newcastle. I'm already over Verbruggen. I think that was a bad backup goalkeeper pick, but it's
mhm,
not worth using a transfer. So similar to you, I'll probably go into next week with 3 frees. And then Palmer has 2 more good fixtures, so it's probably Saka potentially down to Foden, depending
Yeah.
on how he looks against Wolves, and then trying to upgrade, maybe one of the forward spots if I can get to Solanke or get Cunha after game week 8. But what's hard is that Calvert-Lewin and Wood also still have great
Mhm.
fixtures. Like there's really no reason to touch those guys yet. But
Yeah.
you always want to try and be on the next guy before everybody else. So
Yeah, speaking of that, I mean, I brought him up earlier. What are your thoughts on Delap? Right, he saves you. He's in pretty decent form, and he saves you basically point 0.5, point 0.6 on Chris Wood, depending on when you got him. So I don't know if you think that's too much of a lateral move, going from a Chris Wood to a Delap, but he's got great fixtures next as well. So Everton, Brentford, Leicester, 12 and 6 in his last 2 game weeks. So
yeah, I think he's a pick for sure. He should be in some teams. If you plan on playing him, I think he's a bad pick.
okay,
He, in my mind, if you're playing 3-5-2, should be the 8th attacker, the striker that's on the bench. He's better than Strand Larson, and I think he's worth the upgrade over a lower priced forward to have on your bench. But I don't think I would have him in my team as my starting third forward that I could like confidently play every week in the same way that I feel about Chris Wood, DCL, and even like we said, Cunha after this week. I think you can reasonably play those guys every week. I don't
yeah,
know that Delop is there. Just looking at his numbers, it seems like he's converting a lot of super low XG chances kind of in this run. And I do like the fixtures. I think he's a pick, but I just don't know that his current form is going to be sustainable.
yeah. The only reason I asked that is if you dropped, and this is crazy, but if you drop Watkins down to Delap and you've got a 5.6 and a 6.1 forward, that
Hmm.
frees up a ton of budget to upgrade even like a Rogers or a Johnson or a Semenyo to Foden.
So that's who you need to get Semenyo to Foden.
Yeah, yeah, I could drop Delap, I could drop Watkins to Delap, and then I could even upgrade Embuemo to Palmer
Mm,
with that money, right? So I feel like if you've got the balls for it,
the
and you're only playing
cojones,
with
yeah.
two strikers, they both got decent enough fixtures where you might be able to stomach it over these next 3 game weeks. I just play with 2 really cheap budget forwards who have the potential to return and
Plus
upgrade a
Holland, right?
yeah, plus Holland, yeah, of
Plus
course,
Holland,
and
yeah.
upgrade a midfield into that premium bracket, and that solves a little bit of that dilemma we were talking about earlier. So I don't hate that personally. It's the only reason I bring it up. It
Yeah,
goes against what I said about downgrading Watkins, but differential time, I don't know. It's early. We still got some game to play for.
yeah. Like I said, I don't mind downgrading Watkins if you can do some really interesting stuff in midfield, and Foden as kind of the differential this week makes a ton of sense to me. I just don't think you can get away with starting Delop, but if you can do it with DCL, Wood, Cunha, Jimenez,
Mhm.
that to me, I mean Jimenez is in the same price bracket. I would much rather have him
Yeah, that's a
than
good point. The only
Delop.
problem is Jimenez plays, City this week, right? No,
They just played. They got
they
that.
play Aston Villa this week.
Yeah,
Yeah,
which I
so
think
that's
is
not
totally fine.
yeah, 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 and it's home. That's not bad at all.
Yeah. So he'd be the guy to look at. I mean, Muniz did
Yeah.
score off the bench, but I think Jimenez has looked pretty good
Yeah.
and is
Finally
reasonably
scores
safe.
after everybody sells him.
Yeah, reasonably safe in at least the short term.
Yeah, I no, that's a good shout.
Cool. So I'm rolling. I think you're rolling, but we did get in the lab a
With an
little bit and
asterisk there, yeah.
play with some of the forwards. Awesome. Anything else you wanted to touch on this week?
No, 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 no.
Great. With that, we will wrap up with captains.
Captains, of
Let's
course.
not wrap up. Captaincy.
Well, I thought we were naturally going there.
I was about to close out the show without telling
Yeah.
everybody who we were captaining.
Yeah, we
That's
have to
my
have the
bad.
debate about is Saka a must captain now?
All right, projected points, game week 8. Haaland 7.5 away to Wolves. Salah 6.7 home to Chelsea. Solanke 6.2. Who does Spurs have this week?
West Ham, wet spam.
West West Ham, and then Saka 5.9. So it seems this is not the week to go against Haaland. There's a pretty large gap between him and the other candidates. But is there
Yeah.
anybody else that you're considering?
No, for me, it's just Haaland. I think the Bournemouth away fixture is going to be really tough for Arsenal. West Ham always gives Spurs. They always can get it up against Spurs. So I have low hopes for that, especially after the last performance. And like you say, Liverpool playing Chelsea, which are typical other options. So to me, it's Haaland's an auto captain. I bet he recovers his form, bags two more, and all is right with the world.
Yeah, I think I'm on Holland as well. Unfortunately,
Yeah.
not much to talk about this week. I think you could go back to Saka if you wanted, but if you don't have Holland at this point, I think it might be a tough week for you.
Yeah, I really do. That Wolves fixture, she's going to lead goals. I'm with you. Foden is so attractive just because of how many goals Wolves has let in.
Yeah. And I think you could talk me into Foden captaincy, but I think
Hmm.
owning him next week is totally going to
Probably
be
enough. Yeah,
enough. Yeah, you don't need to also captain him.
yeah.
Well, I think now officially that is all that we have for you this week. Just a reminder to rate, review, and subscribe to our show on Spotify, Apple, or wherever you get your podcast. Ratings really do help us, so we appreciate them. We are also on Twitter and Instagram at FPL_free hit pod. You can see our tweets popping off just like Jace's points recap from game week 7 was blowing up. And we will be back in 2 weeks to talk about game week 8 after the international break. Take care and good luck.